Hi, this is Jeff Altman, the Big Game Hunter, and you're listening to Job Search Radio. This is a show where I like to spend a little bit of time talking with you about some element of job search because I believe job hunting doesn't have to be hard, difficult, painful, or take so long. It's just for many of you, the skills needed to find a job are different than the skills needed to do the job. And that's where this show, my other ones, which are called No BS Job Search Advice, which is called No BS Job Search Advice, I should say. I also do one for employers called No BS Hiring Advice. All come in helpful to make the process a lot easier for everyone. Now, this is my last show for 2015. It'll go live in mid-December, and for the balance of the year with Christmas and New Year's, I'm going to do best of shows. And when I do this last show of the year, I like to do a recap of some of the great episodes that I've had over the course of the year. And I did one last year. It was very, very popular. And the highlight of that show was an interview that I did with Rod Cologne. And Rod spoke about being the CEO of me. His basic premise was you're responsible for your career. You're responsible for your life. You're the person who has total control, and you have to act in that way. So that's where we left off last year's show, with that being the highlight of 2014. So let me start off with the first show that I want to highlight, which I think was actually the first show for 2015, an interview I did with Jolene Moody. And Jolene, who's based out of upstate New York, spoke about there being many factors that matter more or matter as much as skills match that go into finding a job or go into a job search. And her interview was a lot of fun, and it's true. It's not just what you know that matters, but it's how your behavior and your knowledge are congruent with what a firm is looking for in an employee. So remember, as you're interviewing, as you're promoting yourself, let your personality out. Don't just simply conduct yourself like you're in a box, and you have to behave in a very confined manner and just simply, regurgitate answers to questions. It's so important to let your personality out as part of your interviews, and even in your resume, even in your LinkedIn profile. It's very important to let your personality show, because otherwise you're just like everyone else. And you don't want to be like everyone else. You want to be someone that, frankly, you want to stand out from the pack. You don't want to be the fish in the pond with millions of other fish. You want to be the fish in the pond with relatively few fish. So that was the first highlight of 2015. Here's another one. It came later in the year where I interviewed a man named Bruce Chodosh. And his email address is bruce@spectracom.com. That's SPECTRACOMM.com. You'll understand why I'm mentioning his email address in a moment. Bruce and I spoke about a measurement, a testing tool called CoreMap, CoreMap, which he administered to me, and I took this test, and I found it far more accurate than I'd ever seen and far more useful than I had seen out of any Myers-Briggs assessment. And I've had multiple administered to me. I've had great experience with them, but CoreMap was a home run for me. And I think that interview was really very helpful. And I know it helped a bunch of other people because Bruce has told me that folks have reached out to him about doing the CoreMap assessment. So if you contact Bruce about having an assessment done and put Job Search Radio in the subject line, he'll provide you with a discount over for the test. And afterwards refer you to me for follow-up coaching, so I can help you implement some of the recommendations that you're interested in following up on, that will help you, frankly, be more effective in life and do work that's congruent with your innate personality and abilities. So I think that was the second highlight of this year. Third one was a great interview I did with a woman named Holly Bunn. And I know I'm going to have her back early part of next year for another interview. But she spoke about using Instagram and Pinterest for job hunting. You believe that? Instagram and Pinterest for job hunting. So her interview with me spoke volumes about being creative and creatively using some of these tools in order to help find your next position. So don't neglect Instagram. Don't neglect Pinterest, particularly if you're in creative fields where you have an opportunity to demonstrate your visual capabilities and your sense of style through that, and reach out to people and frankly cut the line in your communications with folks, because most of them are trying to connect through the quote traditional online medium, and you don't have to do that. So that was my second interview. Another interview that I did. Another interview that I really enjoyed was with a woman named Maureen Sharp. Now, Maureen does a function in search called sourcing. And as a sourcer, what she's attempting to do is reach out to people to get referrals of individuals who she can go out and recruit, who might be qualified for a role. So she herself doesn't do the recruiting. She identifies individuals who fill a role that another firm asks her to go find, and then refers those people to her as potential hires. And she had a fun interview with me where she spoke about how to identify those names and how to relate to the receptionist, for example, and reaching out to folks. So her name is Maureen Sharab, Sharib, and one of her core points is use the phone, damn it. That wasn't how she said it, but at the end of the day, that was her recommendation. Use the phone to reach out to people, and don't just simply focus in on online communication. Spend some time reaching out to folks in that manner as well. And I'm going to pause at this point for my insider tip for this particular show. And understand the format that I work with is one where I normally will interview someone, because this is not the normal format for a job search radio show. It's a 30-minute interview program where I spend some time talking with someone about some element of job search. But there's a point in the show where I interrupt for a job search insider tip. And that tip was the tip for this week is going to be about one of the mistakes people make when being interviewed for the initial interview is creating a weak first impression. How does that happen? Really very simple. Often people create a weak first impression for themselves by not being ready or available at the time that someone's reaching out to them. Perfectly understandable how it happens. You're off doing something else. Someone calls you up out of the blue, and the result winds up being that you're being interrupted. You can't speak freely. You're in a meeting. You're talking to someone else, and when all is said and done, you can't give your full attention to someone. So how do you combat that? Really very simply. What you do is, if you're being interrupted, if you're not able to give full attention, you very simply say, you're catching me at a time where I'm in with others. Can we speak at around 1:30, 3:30, whatever time is good for you? You might say, are you available at 5:30 when I'm in the car? Could I call you back at lunch? I normally would do that at 12:30 Central Time. Does that work for you? Because you don't know what time zone they're in. So you want to offer up the time zone that you're in. Just some places are close to the borderlines of those. So be very clear about what time zone you can call them back at. And then schedule it in your calendar and call them back at that time. If you're not in a place where you can jot down their number, ask them to call you at that time and make sure you're available. Now, when they call you, you want to make sure that you're in a place where you can speak freely, because there's nothing worse than getting someone on the phone and all they're doing is whispering because they don't want to be overheard. Like, whispering doesn't immediately reveal that you're talking to a recruiter, right? So, creating a weak first impression sets things off on a bad footing. You don't want to do that. You always want to be speaking powerfully and effectively about who you are and what you do. So that's my insider tip for this show. If you want to find more, visit my website, which is thebiggamehunter.us. There's a lot more there that you can watch, listen to, or read that's going to help you find work more quickly. And if we're not connected on LinkedIn, send a connection request to me at linkedin.com/IN/the Big Game Hunter. Also want to mention, I inferred this before, I do job search, career coaching, life coaching as well. If you're interested in my coaching you, there's information on my website. I'd be very happy to work with you. So that's my tip for this show. Let me come back and continue where I left off. So I was talking about Maureen Sharab and using the phone, damn it, to reach out to individuals. And in her particular case, she's sourcing job applicants to fill positions. But what you're doing is reaching out to hiring managers. Let's say you've seen a position advertised, or you're interested in working for a particular firm. You might identify them on LinkedIn or using Google, but you don't want to contact them online. What you want to do is to call them and actually speak with them. So use the phone. Don't just simply use email. Don't just simply send in-mails. These days, fewer people are logging on to LinkedIn as frequently as they once did. Your hiring manager may not be getting on for quite some time. Call them, okay? And continuing with that theme, there was an interview I did with a guy named Steve Levy. We're kind of like two bull elephants bumping heads with one another, and it's a lot of fun. And I'll just simply say, there are things that recruiters know intuitively that you don't. And finding a relationship with a recruiter who will treat you with respect and teach you what you need to know in order to get hired at their client is an important relationship to cultivate. Now, I know there are a lot of recruiters who are ineffective by your standards. They're very effective by their client's standards, but by your standards, they're ineffective. And there are a lot of recruiters who are incompetent. Who goes into recruiting? A lot of people who have very little experience. They're salesmen, and they're representing themselves in trying to get a fee. But there are others who are remarkable. And your job is to evaluate and assess people and ensure that you're in a situation where you have an opportunity to work with quality recruiters or a quality recruiter. Don't expect that they're there trying to find the job for you. After all, how much are you paying for the service? Zero. Bupkis. Nada. As such, they're being paid by their client. And it's one of the reasons I moved into job search coaching, is to ensure that there's someone who's representing you, translating some of the bull that goes on in order to ensure that you're getting the correct advice, or you're not having a lot of smoke blown up your butt, and ensure that there's an advocate for you in your position, because the recruiter who's being paid by the company isn't. They may be saying that, but once they're being paid by the corporation, they're being paid to deliver you to them or someone to them. they're not your advocate. It's kind of like in real estate, there's a buyer's agent and a seller's agent. And this is true in the U.S., I don't know if it's true elsewhere, before you're being represented to look at homes, they send a document to you that makes it very clear that there's a difference between a buyer's agent and seller's agent as to who they represent. So in this particular case, they are the seller's agent, and you need an advocate for you as the buyer's agent. So I provide that kind of coaching advice. And again, you can find out about it on my website, have your questions answered, a whole host of other things. So again, there's a lot of things that recruiters know about job hunting that you don't. Develop a relationship with a recruiter over time in order to ensure that your needs are being met. Here's another thing that I found real interesting, and that was that there are ways to defeat a non-compete. And I love that title, How to Defeat a Non-Compete. How to defeat a non-compete. If you're working for startups, often you're in a situation where you're signing a non-compete, and there are ways to get around them. So there's an interview that I did with Jim Lyons, and Jim even offers a document that he'll send to you if you email him and mention that you listen to the podcast on Job Search Radio, and listen to the interview that I did with him about how to get out of a non-compete. Now, there's no deception here. There's no lying. There's no manipulation. There are ways to get out of a non-compete and do it ethically. So it was a great interview. Enjoy it. And I've got a few more points I want to cover here before I get to the number one. And this is a show that I've repeated on Job Search Radio about finding purposeful work and exploring a world where your work is far more enjoyable than it probably is now. Now, this is an interview I did with Dr. Brian Ammons, or Reverend Dr. Brian Ammons, I should say, of Warren Wilson College in I want to say Swannanoa, North Carolina. It could be in Black Mountain, could be in Asheville. I'm not exactly sure where Warren Wilson College is. But he spoke about finding the intersection between your gifts, your passions, and the world's great needs. And he talks about how you explore each of those avenues and comes to a decision about where those intersections are, so that this way you're able to find out what those needs are for yourself, what your gifts are, and find where your passion is and act upon it. Great interview. I believe the title of the show is Finding the Intersection. So again, that's a Job Search Radio interview. It's available through iTunes, Stitcher, and a variety of other podcast directories, as well as on webtalkradio.net. So we're coming up on the last two, and they're kind of intertwined. So I'm going to announce that my favorite show for last year, the number one rated advice I got, was an interview I did with Aaron Walker from View from the Top. Now, View from the Top is a mastermind service that Aaron started. And he's a guy who's been very successful in his business life. I don't know if he's a billionaire, but clearly he's close if he isn't. And based out of Tennessee, Walker is a guy who sat in masterminds with Dave Ramsey. And I want to say, I know his last name is Miller, Dave Miller, I think. He also has a podcast about finding work. Spiritual bent to him, to Ramsey, to Walker as well. And it's a funny interview, but there was some great coaching that was available for me in that show, where I addressed the notion of people having fear and confronting their fears. And that fear grips many people. I know it grips me at times. And in my case, he advised me that my fear was one where I had trouble recognizing that I had no control. And it encouraged me to look at the sort of things where I would fear opportunity or missing an opportunity more than fearing making a mistake. And then he continued on by talking about how at 18, you always think that everyone's talking about you. At 35, you don't care. And at 60, you realize they weren't talking about you to begin with. And encourages people to have a growth mindset rather than a fear mindset. It is a great interview, and it couples in very well with another interview that I did with a man named Chance Turow. Chance is a coach. He works with special forces people and talks about confronting the boulders and barriers in your job search and in your life. And when you think about it, there's some pretty big rocks that get placed in your way that stand in the way of you having the life that you want. There are ways that with support you can defeat those those boulders, and push past them and have the life and the career that you want. Now, often that requires a good coach. And I'll simply say, I am not a good coach. I'm a terrific coach. I'd be happy to work with you. Because if it were easy, if it were something that you could do easily, you'd already done it, right? But there's something that stands between you and having that victory. And often it's more than one thing. A coach is going to help you take small steps toward defeating and pushing past those boulders and getting to the other side, so that this way you can have a successful career, successful life, and enjoy yourself far more. So fear grips. Coaches help you defeat that fear and live the life and have the career that you want. So that's my show for this week. I hope you enjoy it. I'm going to be back in the beginning of 2016 with a lot of new information for you. I already have some great interviews lined up with people. 1 or 2 shows already recorded. And an opportunity to help you. Again, visit my website, which is thebiggamehunter.us. There's a lot there that you can watch, listen to, or read to help you find work more quickly. And if we are connected on LinkedIn, send a connection request at linkedin.com/IN/thebiggamehunter. I'm Jeff Altman. I want to coach you to play big. Reach out and have a spectacular day. Take care.